Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Vortex Tower, a Chicago blizzard was burying the city in white. Inside, CEO Preston Sterling was watching his billion-dollar empire freeze just as fast. The heating vents in the ultra-modern boardroom hummed softly, but the atmosphere was colder than the ice accumulating on the glass. At the center of the mahogany table, a holographic display flickered with a relentless stream of red error messages. 72 hours, Sterling growled, his voice tight with suppressed panic. He paced in front of the 50-foot Christmas tree, which was decorated not with warmth and care, but with cold, metallic ornaments that probably cost more than most people's houses. We launched the national drone delivery fleet in 72 hours. Half the country is waiting for their Christmas packages, and my billion-dollar AI is acting like a stubborn mule. He turned sharply toward his team of engineers, who were huddled over their laptops like frightened schoolchildren. Dr. Lucas Gray, the brilliant but exhausted technical director, rubbed his temples. Mr. Sterling, we've run the diagnostics 3 times. The navigation algorithm is looping. It's a logic conflict we can't isolate. Cannot isolate? Sterling repeated, his face flushing a dangerous shade of purple. He adjusted his silk Italian tie, a nervous tic that everyone in the room knew meant trouble. I don't pay you for cannot, Lucas. I pay you for done. The investors from Global Express are sitting right there. He gestured to the 3 stone-faced executives at the end of the table, who were checking their watches with synchronized impatience. They are ready to pull the plug on the biggest contract in Omnisys history, because you people can't make a toy helicopter fly. In the far corner of the room, invisible to the titans of industry arguing over millions of dollars, 10-year-old Eli Brooks sat on a folding chair. He pulled his knees to his chest, his scuffed sneakers barely touching the plush carpet. He adjusted his glasses, which were held together at the bridge by a thick strip of white tape, and hugged his worn-out backpack. To anyone who glanced his way, he was just a piece of furniture, something to be ignored. But Eli wasn't looking at his library book. His dark eyes were locked onto the main screen, tracking the cascading lines of code that the adults were too busy shouting to read. His mother, Martha, moved silently around the perimeter of the room. She was a small woman with tired eyes and hands roughened by years of scrubbing other people's floors. She moved with the practiced stealth of someone who knew that her survival depended on not being noticed. She carefully lifted a trash bin, trying to keep the plastic liner from rustling. She caught Eli's eye and gave him a tiny worried shake of her hiata, silent plea for him to stay still, to stay quiet, to not give these powerful men a reason to look at them. This is exactly why I believe in pedigree, Sterling announced, his voice echoing off the marble walls. He wasn't talking to anyone specific anymore. He was broadcasting his frustration to the universe. Intelligence isn't democratic. It is cultivated. I hired the best minds from MIT and Stanford, and yet, here we are. He looked at Dr. Gray with undisguised contempt. Perhaps the problem isn't the code. Perhaps the problem is the caliber of the mind writing it. Eli shifted in his chair. He saw it again, the same command repeating on the screen. It was so simple. It was right there. Mr. Sterling, please, Dr. Gray began, his voice cracking. We just need more time. Time is money. Sterling roared. In a fit of blind rage, he snatched up a tablet from the table and hurled it against the wall. It shattered with a deafening crack, shards of glass skittering across the floor. Martha flinched violently at the noise. The heavy trash bag she was lifting slipped from her startled grip and hit the floor with a dull thud. A half-empty cup of coffee spilled out, spreading a dark stain across the pristine beige carpet. The room went instantly, terrifyingly silent. The only sound was the howling wind outside and the hum of the servers. Every head turned toward the cleaner and her son. Martha froze, her face draining of color. She dropped to her knees, frantically trying to wipe up the spill with her sleeve. I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. It slipped. I'll clean it up. Sterling stared at the stain, then raised his eyes to Martha. His expression wasn't just angry. It was disgusted, as if he were looking at something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. He walked over to her, looming like a predator. Sterling turns his fury onto Martha, sneering, Great. Even the help is incompetent. Get that mess and your kid out of here before I fire you. Eli didn't move toward the exit. Instead, His eyes locked onto the main server screen where a red command line blinked like a heartbeat. His mother was trembling, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the knot on the trash bag. She grabbed his arm, her fingers tight with fear. "Eli, come on," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We have to go. Now." But Eli's feet felt rooted to the floor. The code on the screen was screaming at him. It was a pattern he recognized, not from a computer book, but from the kitchen table in their small apartment. It was the same lesson his mother taught him every single day. Manners matter, Eli. You don't demand, you ask. "I think I know what's wrong," Eli said. His voice was small, barely a squeak against the hum of the servers, but in the terrified silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. Martha froze. The executives stopped checking their watches. Preston Sterling, who had been turning away to pour himself a glass of water, spun around slowly. "Excuse me?" Sterling asked, his voice dripping with dangerous amusement. "Did the furniture just speak?" Martha tried to pull Eli behind her, shielding him with her body. "He didn't mean anything, sir. He's just a child. We're leaving." "No, wait," Eli said, stepping out from behind his mother's protective grasp. He adjusted his taped glasses, looking like a tiny, serious professor in a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big. "The drones aren't broken, Mr. Sterling. They're just confused." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the investors. Sterling looked at his watch, then at Eli, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Confused? You hear that, gentlemen? My $100 million AI isn't malfunctioning. It's just having an identity crisis." He took a step toward Eli, looming over the boy. "Tell me, son, what does a janitor's boy know about autonomous flight algorithms? Did you read it on a gum wrapper?" "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Gray interjected softly. "The kid, he's looking at the command syntax." "Quiet, Lucas," Sterling snapped. He looked back at Eli, enjoying the sport of it. "Go on, genius. Enlighten us." Eli swallowed hard. His heart was hammering against his ribs, but his mind was clear. "You're telling them to fly," Eli said, pointing a small finger at the wall of screens. "But you didn't ask if the sky was clear first. The computer thinks you're yelling at it to move, but its sensors see the snow, so it's scared to move. It's stuck between your order and its safety rules." The room went quiet. Dr. Gray squinted at the screen, tilting his head. "He means the override protocol versus the obstacle avoidance," the engineer muttered to himself. "The hierarchy implies a command instead of a query." Sterling's smile faltered for a second, then hardened into a sneer. He felt the eyes of the investors on him judging him, laughing at him. He couldn't let a child, especially this child, undermine his authority. "You think this is a game, boy?" Sterling hissed, stepping right into Eli's personal space. The smell of expensive cologne was overpowering. "You think because you guessed a riddle, you belong in this room? This is the real world. This is a $100 million problem." He gestured wildly at the console, his face twisting with malice. "You want to play CEO? Fine." He looked at the investors, then back at Eli. "Fix this, kid, and I'll give you $100 million. If you can't, get out and take your mother's job with you. And don't ever let me see your face in this building again." Martha gasped. "Sir, please, he's 10 years old." "Deal," Sterling interrupted, staring Eli down. "Double or nothing on your mother's paycheck." The boardroom fell dead silent. The wind howled outside, rattling the glass. Eli looked at his terrified mother, seeing the tears welling in her eyes. Then he looked at the arrogant man towering over him. He took a deep breath, reached up and pushed his glasses up his nose. Eli adjusts his glasses, looks at his terrified mother, and then at the screen. "Can I use the keyboard?" he asks. Dr. Gray hesitated, then slid the wireless keyboard across the mahogany table toward Eli's small, trembling hands. The sleek, brushed aluminum device looked enormous in front of the 10-year-old, like a control panel for a spaceship rather than a simple input tool. "Don't do this, Lucas," Sterling warned, crossing his arms over his chest. He leaned back against the edge of the conference table, a look of supreme boredom plastered on his face. "You're letting a child tamper with proprietary code. When he crashes the kernel completely, don't say I didn't warn you." "The system is already crashed, Preston," Dr. Gray muttered, his eyes fixed on Eli. What's the worst he can do? Make it doubly broken. Eli didn't hear them. As his fingers touched the cool metal of the keys, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. The jeering CEO, the impatient investors in their expensive suits, even the howling blizzard outside Deet all became background noise. All that existed was the wall of text in front of him. To the engineers, it was a chaotic mess of syntax and algorithms. To Eli, it was a conversation that had gone wrong. It was a shouting match between a demanding boss and a scared employee. He climbed up onto the leather chair, his legs dangling, and pulled the keyboard onto his lap. It was heavy. He adjusted his glasses again, squinting at line 4209. CMD_execute_force_with. See? Eli whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. You're yelling at it. He didn't type fast like the hackers in the movies. He typed slowly, hunting and pecking with 2 fingers. Click, click, click. The sound was agonizingly loud in the silent boardroom. Sterling let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. This is painful. I have a dinner reservation at Lou Bernardin in an hour. Can we wrap up this kindergarten show and tell? One of the investors, a silver-haired man from Global Express, actually leaned forward. Quiet, Sterling, he snapped. Let the boy work. Eli's finger hovered over the delete key. He tapped it, erasing the word force. Then, with agonizing care, he typed in a new command. He didn't use complex mathematical formulas. He used a conditional request. Query _clear proceed. It's like holding the door open, Eli mumbled, thinking of how Mr. Henry always held the lobby door for him and his mom. You don't push people through. You wait for them to walk. He paused. He looked at the enter key. His mother, Martha, was holding her breath, her hands clasped in front of her chest as if she were praying. She didn't understand the code, but she understood her son. She knew the look of intense focus on his face, the same look he had when he was fixing the toaster or rewiring a broken lamp. Eli pressed enter. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The screens remained a wall of angry, pulsating red. Well, Sterling clapped his hands together, pushing himself off the table. That was riveting. A valiant effort, truly. Now, get out before I call security too. Bleep. A soft, melodic chime cut through Sterling's tirade. On the main screen, the red bar at the top flickered. It turned yellow. Then, cascading down like a waterfall, the lines of error code began to vanish, replaced by streaming lines of data that moved smooth and fast. Yellow turned to green. Bright, vibrant, Christmas tree green. On the side monitors, the simulation of the drone fleet, which had been frozen in a gridlock of collisions, suddenly sprang to life. The digital drones on the map blinked and began to move, weaving around each other in a perfect, harmonious ballet. They weren't crashing. They were flying. What? Sterling whispered, the color draining from his face. No. That's a simulation error. Dr. Gray scrambled over the console, his fingers flying across his own keyboard as he checked the diagnostics. It's not an error, he gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. Latency is down to 0. Packet loss is 0. The deadlock is cleared. The system, it's live. It's actually working. The room erupted. The investors stood up, pointing at the screens and talking over each other in excited, hushed tones. Did you see that? The kid just cleared the bottleneck. We can launch. We can actually launch by Christmas Eve. Eli sat back in the big leather chair, looking small and exhausted. He pushed the keyboard away and looked at his mom. A shy smile spread across his face. See, Mom? They just needed to be asked nicely. Martha sobbed, a sound of pure relief, and rushed forward to hug him. Oh, Eli. My smart baby. You did it. Sterling stood frozen, isolated in the middle of his own boardroom. His billion-dollar crisis had been solved in 5 minutes by a boy who didn't even own a computer. He looked at the green screens, then at the investors who were now looking at Eli with respect, the kind of respect they had never shown him. Humiliation burned in his chest, hot and suffocating. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let a cleaner's son win. He forced a smile onto his face. It was a tight, ugly thing that didn't reach his cold eyes. He walked over to the table, looking down at Eli and Martha. "Beginner's luck," he hissed, his voice low so only they could hear. "You fixed a typo, kid." "A monkey could fix a typo." "He fixed the logic, Preston," Dr. Gray argued, standing up for the boy. "He saw what we missed." "He got lucky," Sterling snapped. He leaned in closer to Eli, his shadow falling over the boy. "But let's see you fix the real mess in the security mainframe. The deep code. That's not for children." He narrowed his eyes, sensing an opportunity to crush this moment of victory before it grew. "Double or nothing, kid. 24 hours. The digital clock on the wall read 3 a.m., and while the city of Chicago slept under a blanket of snow, 10-year-old Eli Brooks was wide awake, fighting a billion-dollar war. The boardroom, once a hive of shouting executives, was now eerily quiet, save for the hum of the cooling fans and the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of Eli's fingers on the keyboard. His eyes felt gritty, like someone had thrown sand in them. His stomach grumbled, echoing in the large room. The pizza boxes scattered on the side table were empty. The engineers had devoured them hours ago, leaving Eli with nothing but a dry crust. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and Mr. Henry, the night shift security guard, shuffled in. He was a kindly old man with a white mustache and a uniform that had seen better days. He carried a thermos and a small, wrapped bundle. He bypassed the sleeping engineers and the CEO, walking straight to the small boy huddled in the giant leather chair. "Thought you might need this, young man," Mr. Henry whispered, setting down a steaming cup of hot cocoa and a packet of graham crackers. He draped a heavy wool blanket over Eli's shoulders. "It gets cold up here in the clouds. Don't let the frostbite get you." Eli smiled, wrapping his cold hands around the warm cup. "Thanks, Mr. Henry." "You show 'em, Eli," the guard winked before shuffling back out. Eli looked over at the corner where his mother, Martha, was curled up on a hard plastic chair, using her coat as a pillow. She was asleep, but her face was pinched with worry even in her dreams. Then he looked at the other end of the table. Preston Sterling was sprawled out in his ergonomic executive chair, feet up on the table, snoring softly. Even in his sleep, he looked arrogant. He had bet everything against them because he believed Eli and people like Ella didn't matter. A surge of determination warmed Eli more than the cocoa ever could. He turned back to the screen. "Dr. Gray," Eli whispered. Dr. Gray, who was nursing a cold cup of coffee and looking like a zombie, leaned in. "What is it, kid? You find another syntax error?" "No," Eli said, frowning behind his taped glasses. "I found a door." "A door?" "In the security wall," Eli explained, pointing to a complex block of code on the submonitor. "Right here. It looks like a lock, but it doesn't have a keyhole. It just opens for anyone who knocks 3 times. Dr. Gray rubbed his eyes and squinted at the lines Eli was highlighting. That's the external port for the maintenance updates. It's supposed to be encrypted." "It's not encrypted," Eli said simply. "It's painted to look encrypted. See? The code says, if user equals admin, open. But it doesn't check who the admin is. It just believes them." Dr. Gray's eyes widened as the implication hit him. He pulled his laptop closer, typing furiously to verify Eli's observation. "My God," he breathed. "He's right. It's a hard-coded bypass. It ignores the authentication protocol completely." He looked at Eli with a mix of awe and horror. "This isn't a mistake, Eli. You don't accidentally write a bypass like this. This was put here on purpose." Hours bled into morning. The sun began to rise over Lake Michigan, painting the snow-covered city in shades of pink and gold. The light hit Sterling's face, rousing him from his slumber. He groaned, stretched, and sat up, smoothing his wrinkled suit jacket. He looked at the clock, then at Eli, who was still typing, though his head was drooping with exhaustion. "Still at it?" Sterling scoffed, his voice raspy from sleep. He stood up and walked over, grabbing a bottle of water. "Give up yet, kid? The snow is piling up outside. Long walk home for a loser." Eli didn't look up. He was staring at a new window he had just opened. His heart was pounding in his chest, a heavy, thudding rhythm. "Mr. Sterling," Eli said, his voice surprisingly steady. "What?" Sterling snapped, annoyed that the boy hadn't dissolved into tears yet. Eli rubbed his tired eyes and pointed to the screen. Mr. Sterling, someone left the back door open on purpose. And I think money is leaking out of it. Sterling froze mid-sip. What are you babbling about? The bypass, Eli said. It's not just letting people in. It's sending things out. Look at the data stream. Sterling marched over, pushing Dr. Gray aside to look at the monitor. Don't be ridiculous. That's a standard maintenance port. It's sending diagnostic logs. Diagnostic logs are text files, Dr. Gray said, his voice cold and hard. He stood up, towering over the seated CEO for the first time. This isn't text, Preston. This is encrypted financial data. And it's flowing out of the company accounts into an external server. That's impossible. Sterling yelled, his face turning red. That's a glitch. A display error. But on the screen, the stream of data flowed relentlessly, a river of digital currency leaving the vault. It wasn't a trickle. It was a flood. And everyone in the room could see it. That's not maintenance. Dr. Gray's voice trembled as he traced the data flow on his laptop screen. That's a robbery. And it's been happening for months. The words hung in the air, heavier than the silence that had preceded them. The sun was now fully up, its harsh winter light flooding the boardroom and exposing the exhaustion on everyone's faces except for Preston Sterling, whose face was rapidly losing all color. Don't be absurd, Lucas, Sterling stammered, his usual arrogance replaced by a frantic, sweaty desperation. He lunged toward the main console, his hand hovering over the power button. It's a display bug. A glitch caused by the boys' tampering. We need to shut the system down immediately before it corrupts the backup servers. Don't touch it. The shout didn't come from Dr. Gray, but from the lead representative of Global Express, Mr. Vance. The silver-haired investor stood up, his eyes cold and hard. If money is moving out of this company, I want to see exactly where it's going. Sit down, Preston. Sterling froze. He looked at the investors, then at his engineers, and finally at the small boy sitting in the oversized leather chair. He realized he was losing control of the room. He needed a scapegoat, and fast. It's hackers, Sterling yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. It has to be. The Russians, or maybe a Chinese syndicate. They must have planted a Trojan horse months ago. This is a cyber attack. We are victims here. Eli watched the CEO unravel. He looked at the code again, tilting his head to the side. It didn't look like an attack. It looked organized. It looked tidy. It's not strangers, Mr. Sterling, Eli said softly. Shut up. Sterling screamed, his composure shattering completely. You don't know anything about corporate espionage. You're a child. A janitor's child. But Mr. Sterling, Eli continued, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the man's panic. When my mom cleans a house, she checks under the rugs and behind the sofas. She says that's where people hide the dirt because they think no one looks there. You guys only cleaned the middle of the room. Eli tapped a key, bringing up the file properties of the backdoor code. Look at the timestamp, Eli said, pointing to the date created. This bad code wasn't added later by a hacker. It was written on the very first day the project started. At the exact same minute the core system was built. Dr. Gray gasped, leaning closer to the screen. He's right. The timestamp matches the creation of the root directory. This wasn't an injection. This was part of the original architecture. Sterling was backing away toward the door now, loosening his tie as if he couldn't breathe. Coincidence? Timestamps can be spoofed. And the password? Eli asked innocently. The backdoor is locked with a user ID. He highlighted the line of text that defined the secret admin access. It says the user is King Midas. The room went deadly silent. Every eye turned to Preston Sterling. Mr. Vance from Global Express let out a dry, humorless chuckle. King Midas, he repeated. That's the name of your yacht, isn't it, Preston? I was on it last summer. It's a common name, Sterling croaked, hitting the wall. He was trapped. It's an inside job, Dr. Gray whispered, the betrayal evident in his voice. You didn't push us to finish the AI because you wanted it to work. You pushed us because you needed the chaos. The crashes, the glitches, they were a smokescreen. Every time the system failed and rebooted, it covered your tracks while you siphoned off investor funds. I did it for the company, Sterling shouted, his voice cracking. We were undercapitalized. I needed liquidity to keep us afloat. I was going to put it back. You were stealing from us, Mr. Vance said, pulling out his phone. You caused a nationwide logistics crisis, risked Christmas for millions of families, and humiliated your staff just to cover up your own embezzlement. Sterling looked around wildly. The game was up. His billion-dollar empire, his reputation, his Italian suit was all dissolving. And it wasn't destroyed by a corporate rival or a government audit. It was dismantled, line by line, by a 10-year-old boy in a hoodie who just wanted to help his mom keep her job. I can explain, Sterling pleaded, holding up his hands. We can work this out, gentlemen. It's a misunderstanding. A financial restructuring strategy. Bam. The heavy double doors of the boardroom burst open, slamming against the marble walls with a thunderous crash. It wasn't the lunch delivery. 6 men in windbreakers, emblazoned with 3 bold yellow letters, marched into the room. FBI, the lead agent shouted, his hand resting on his holster. Nobody move. Preston Sterling, step away from the wall and keep your hands where I can see them. Sterling slumped against the glass window, looking down at the city he thought he ruled. Behind him, Eli sat quietly, closing the laptop. The back door was closed. The dirt had been swept out from under the rug. The click of handcuffs on Preston Sterling's wrist sounded louder than the blizzard ever had. It was the sound of justice finally being served. The man who had terrorized his employees and mocked a child just hours ago was now slumped forward, his expensive suit rumpled, his face a mask of defeat. As the agents marched him past the conference table, Sterling didn't look at the investors or his engineers. He looked at the floor, unable to meet the gaze of the 10-year-old boy who had outsmarted him. You have the right to remain silent, an agent recited, the words bouncing off the marble walls that Sterling had once thought protected him from the world. As the heavy doors swung shut behind the disgraced CEO, a collective sigh seemed to deflate the tension in the room. The silence that followed wasn't fearful anymore. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. Mr. Vance, the representative from Global Express, was the first to move. He walked slowly around the massive mahogany table, stopping in front of Eli. He looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. He didn't see a janitor's son in a hoodie. He saw the savior of his company. Young man, Vance said, his voice thick with emotion. He extended a hand, not as an adult to a child, but as an equal. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that. You saved us billions today. You saved Christmas for half the country. Eli shook the man's hand. His grip was small but firm. I just fixed the code, sir. You did more than that, Dr. Gray added, wiping his glasses on his shirt. He looked at Martha, who was standing protectively behind her son, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Brooks, your son has a gift. A rare gift. And we are so sorry for how you were treated in this room. Vance pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket. It was a heavy leather-bound book that looked serious. Preston made a bet, Vance announced to the room. And while Preston is going to prison, Omnisys still honors its debts. We might need the lawyers to finalize the full $100 million in trust, but for today, he scribbled quickly, tore off the check, and handed it to Martha. Martha's hands shook as she took the slip of paper. She gasped, covering her mouth. It was a check for $10 million in advance on a future that was now brighter than she could have ever imagined. Consider this a consulting fee, Vance smiled warmly. And Dr. Gray here will be drawing up the paperwork for a full scholarship to any university Eli chooses. When he's old enough, he has a job waiting for him. Any job he wants. Martha dropped to her knees, hugging Eli so tight he squeaked. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Eli hugged his mom back, burying his face in her shoulder. He didn't care about the check. He cared that his mom wasn't scared anymore. He cared that she was smiling. They walked out of the boardroom 10 minutes later, leaving the stunned executives to clean up the corporate mess. As they reached the lobby of the Vortex Tower, Mr. Henry was waiting by the revolving doors. The old guard tipped his cap, his eyes twinkling. Heard quite a commotion upstairs, Mr. Henry chuckled. Everything all right, Eli? Yeah, Mr. Henry, Eli said, adjusting his taped glasses. We just had to take out the trash. Mr. Henry winked and held the door open for them. The cold air that hit them wasn't biting anymore. It felt crisp, clean, and full of promise. The snow had stopped, leaving Chicago covered in a pristine white blanket under the morning sun. "Eli," Martha asked softly as they walked toward the bus stop, clutching the check that would change their lives forever. "How did you know? About the code? About the bad man?" Eli shrugged, holding his mom's hand tight. "I just wanted to finish so we could go home for Christmas." He stopped and looked back at the towering glass building one last time. It looked different now, not like a fortress that kept him out, but just a building full of machines that needed help. He smiled, a small, secret smile of a boy who knows something the rest of the world is just figuring out. "Besides," Eli said, turning back to the road ahead, "computers are easy. People are the hard part. Like a lighthouse guiding ships through a winter storm, true wisdom often shines from the most unexpected places." Eli Brooks taught us that brilliance isn't defined by the price of a suit or the title on a door, but by the clarity of a kind heart and an open mind. So the next time you see someone standing in the background unnoticed and unheard, remember, they might just hold the key that saves the day. If this story warmed your heart, share it to remind the world that even the smallest light can conquer the darkest shadow.